Few stories have seen as many adaptations, retellings, and the level of global recognition as The Journey to the West. Hailed as one of China's 4 great classical novels, the story, ostensibly written by Cheng'en around the 16th century, is one you've likely seen or heard 1,000 times. A monk, Xuanzang, or sometimes Tripitaka, is tasked by the Tang Emperor to retrieve Buddhist scriptures from the West, and along the way he meets and takes on 3 disciples: Sand Demon Sha Wujing, Pig Demon Zhu Bajie, and the iconic, legendary Sun Wukong, the Monkey King himself. Its episodic nature allows itself to be very easily adapted, with arcs and chapters usually being enough to satisfy the 3-act structure of most media. Not to mention that its stories, in which a group of characters with unique skill sets team up against enemies, have become the formula for shonen action anime since time immemorial. From showing up in Chinese opera to its translations into one of the most profitable and iconic Japanese media franchises, The Journey to the West's staying power is evident. It's hundreds of years old, and last year's Black Myth Wukong was one of the fastest selling video games of all time. I don't see the Canterbury Tales Souls-like pulling those kinds of numbers. Looking past these stage shows, anime series, video games, and whatever the hell Damon Albarn was doing that one time, cinema is where The Journey to the West thrives the most. Since the 1928 silent classic, we've had almost 100 years of cinematic adaptations, and I'm going to look at some of the best out there. Here are 5 Journey to the West films that I love. We start the list with about as straightforward a retelling as you can expect. Monkey Goes West tells you from the get-go what it's about, thanks to its incredibly matter-of-fact name. It's a retelling of what I'm calling the recruitment arc of the books. In this story, the monk leaves his kingdom and encounters Sun Wukong and friends, enlisting their help for the journey, all the while battling an entirely new villain called the Green Snake Demon, who wants to eat the monk and gain immortality. If you're looking for an experience that most accurately captures the spirit of the Journey to the West, then you'll have a hard time finding any better than the films the Shaw Brothers produced in the 1960s, featuring pantomime performances, musical acts, kung fu that is more in line with dance than martial arts, and a general feeling of Chinese opera. There's something both classic and contemporary about these versions that feels true to the performative nature of the story's oral traditions. The Tang monk is a humble individual who wishes to see the good in everyone. Bajie is a coward, and Wu Jing does nothing. So far, very true to the source. It's also very faithful in an entirely different way, in that it's full of actual faith of the Buddhist kind. Monkey Goes West is one of the few adaptations of The Journey to the West that keeps intact a massive part of the story's original intent, to teach Buddhist values to children. The 1941 animated Princess Iron Fan did that notably in its opening narration, but since then the focus tends to be more on the demon slaying and the adventuring aspects. Monkey Goes West leans on its Buddhist lessons to tell its story, and ultimately just feels more like its source material than others of its kind. Monkey Goes West's accuracy to its source might be its biggest strength, but it's also kind of one of its weaknesses. As a retelling of the book, or a few chapters of the book, it's pretty strong, doing only minor tweaks to the pacing to make it fit, all the while including an overarching villain to tie it all together. But this lack of deviation also makes it a bit less interesting than some of the others on this list, and some I've kept off. Still, the Shaw Brothers' Journey to the West films are easily among some of the most accurate and charmingly simple adaptations I have ever seen, completely earnest in their attempts to retell the beloved novel. The actors all absolutely nail their roles, adding a bit of theatricality to the proceedings, and despite looking a lot like it was shot on a soundstage, that style kind of works for the story and, more importantly, for the way it's choosing to tell it. If this is your cinematic journey into these adaptations, there are certainly worse beginnings. Sun Wukong is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most recognizable, interesting, and, most importantly, marketable of the 4 main characters of The Journey to the West. Monkey, Monkey King, Wukong, and other descriptors of the overpowered trickster demon tend to pepper Journey to the West titles. See our previous entry, and Soi Chiang's trilogy of adaptations is certainly no exception. We're skipping talking about the original, the first Monkey King in the series, mostly because it just wasn't very good. It was a mediocre retelling of the first few chapters, mired with terrible CGI and a massively wasted Chow Yun Fat. But also, it's the reason why this trilogy is named after only one character. The Monkey King 2, however, is when things really picked up. The movies replaced what looked like an endless list of writers with just the one, and with it, the story was streamlined, the themes were put into focus, and the movie just generally flowed a lot better. For one, despite its title, this sequel focused on more than just Wukong and showed us the whole gang getting together to fight the White Bone Demon. Aaron Kwok replaced Donnie Yen as the titular character, and while Yen had a sort of cheeky silliness that worked well for a young Wukong, the imprisonment has certainly hardened him, and his fierce loyalty is played to perfection by Kwok. In fact, it's the cast that lets this adaptation shine, and the interactions they share make for a strong film. Having Wukong alone in the first part was a major mistake, fixed here as is the CGI, which has improved drastically from the original film, even if the fight scenes do remind one of some of the less interesting Marvel films. The Monkey King 2 has something that few other films on this list does. It gives the Tang monk something to actually do, and some agency in his own story. It's a theme that will come to a head in the third film, but that's for another time. For now, Monkey King 2 was a great recentering and reincarnation for a series that was almost dead on arrival. Red Boy is arguably one of the most popular villains in the story, behind his parents Princess Ironfan and the Bull Demon King. Red Boy comes to the story with baggage. The heroes have interacted with his parents more than once, usually in less than positive light, and so he has something of a chip on his shoulder, especially against Wukong. After encountering the party at Mount Hao, he proves himself to be one of the most formidable adversaries in the series, defeating Wukong with relative ease in hand-to-hand combat. His ultimate defeat and conversion as an attendant of Guan Yin, 500-year-old spoilers by the way, is one of the story's most enduring Buddhist lessons. The Fantastic Magic Baby retells this story, and unlike many other portrayals, actually has a kid play the title character. It's another Shaw Brothers production, but unrelated to the Monkey Goes West trilogy I mentioned earlier. Still, it carries many of that series' distinctive features. On top of having the most fun name out of all the films on this list, it's one of the most visually interesting. Like Monkey Goes West, this one utilizes a lot of hand-painted backgrounds and Star Trek quality sets, plenty of dancing pretending to be martial arts, and some truly goofy but extremely quirky makeup and effects. The whole thing looks like it's shot on a stage during a live production, and that is much to its credit. It sets you up for theatrics and Chinese opera, like many others, but doubles down, so it's fitting that the movie proper is only actually about an hour long, with the remaining time dedicated to an actual Chinese opera show. It's an odd addendum, something you'd expect to see on a DVD extra if such a thing existed in 1975, but it works shockingly well here as a punctuation that emphasizes just where the filmmakers were coming from. The Fantastic Magic Baby does exactly what it says it will, and does it well, and should be checked out for theatricality alone. One of the most well-known films in this list, if not the most well-known, Journey to the West Conquering the Demons, was Stephen Chow's 2013 return to the story, having done two very loose adaptations 20 years prior with A Chinese Odyssey. The two, later three Chinese Odyssey films were well received, but their connection to the journey is tenuous at best. Perhaps I'll cover it in another video. For Conquering the Demons, Chow took a different approach, looking at the Tang monk Xuanzang, who is more often than not ignored or relegated to the role of damsel in distress. Here, he's a bit more of a badass, and much better at hunting demons. He keeps his Boy Scout nature, though, and believes that he can coax the goodness out of any demon by reading them nursery rhymes. But at least he takes more initiative than the one we typically see on screen. The focus on Tripitaka makes Conquering the Demons so much stronger. Its theme of redemption, which permeates the story from the first minute, wouldn't work without him as its protagonist. And when we get to the Monkey King, things fall even more into place. By only introducing us to Sun Wukong later in the story, and in a really striking departure from the norm, the themes really get to stand out. Wukong gets to have an arc, from a grim, angry character to the hero we know him as, largely thanks to Xuanzang's grace. But it is a Stephen Chow film, so it can't be too serious. Featuring a pretty stellar blend of silly off-the-wall cartoon physics, for which he became famous, mixed in with the darkness inherent with a story about demons, the film finds a unique spot that brings Journey to the West's most important character into the spotlight and gives him the credit he finally deserves, while remaining true to both the original source and the director's style. In terms of accuracy to the story, it gets a 5 at best, mostly for being thematically correct, but it scores much higher than that in pure entertainment value. Filled with great visuals, sight gags, and excellent action choreography, it's evident that Conquering the Demons is the Sun Wukong film Stephen Chow clearly wanted to make. It's worth remembering that while it's hardly a history textbook, the Journey to the West is somewhat based off real events. Well, at least one real event, the expedition done by 7th century monk Xuanzang to India to collect Buddhist texts and return them to China, in defiance of the emperor's ban on westward travelling. The movie is something of a retelling of those events. It eschews the bone demons, wheel boys, pig monsters, and fire mountains in favour of, reality. Set in a country in the middle of a war, it tells the grueling tale of a lone man's 14-year trip to travel what is ultimately just a few hundred miles. Don't worry, he takes breaks here and there. The film is part historical retelling, part legend, and part Buddhist musings. The journey undertaken by the monk is just as spiritual as it is physical, as he battles bureaucracy and befriends everyone he meets to allow him to pass through unharmed. His friendliness and ability to gain support wherever he goes does lower the stakes considerably, but this lack of physical danger does nothing to undercut just how much of an adventure this feels like. From sweeping camera angles to extended desert sequences, director Huo Zhangqi does a great job of telling us how much of an undertaking is this whole thing. There might not be any demons for him to face, but the idea of him walking on foot all across China, 2 deserts, and then through India feels far more daunting and intense than any trip you could take with 3 ultra-powerful demon disciples by your side. The film is a bit rammed in terms of content, from its baffling framing narrative to the fact that it has to shove almost 2 decades of travelling into a 2-hour runtime. It's a character drama and a travelogue and a reflection on Buddhism, so it has a lot to get through, and while it might not always nail each of its themes, it provides plenty of historical context for a man whose epic journey shaped not only Buddhism in China, but the way we tell stories across the globe. Xuanzang is a man celebrated far and wide, and whose pop culture self has been everything from a kid called Jason Tripitakas to friggin' Bulma. It's really good to see the real deal get the recognition he so deserves. And that's the video. If there are other versions of the Journey to the West that you love that I have not mentioned, please tell me about them in the comments below. There are almost countless amounts of Journey to the West adaptations, so I'll probably do another one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.